Good evening, folks. Welcome to this week's edition of Nerd News Live, Nerd Week Live. End of the year, I screwed up the name of the show. And let me get that music stopped. Awesome, very cool. We are wrapping up 2018. We are talking about some of the biggest nerd news stories and cool things that happened in 2018. We've also got some news. We're going to blast through those pretty quickly at the beginning of the show. But let's start with, of course, the introductions. I am Rodney Brown. I'm the editor-in-chief of Nerd Caliber. I am also first-person shooter on the interwebs as a photographer. I'm Burly Adopter on Twitter and a couple of other things as a snarky person. And joining me tonight... repping the holidays. I have a sweater, but it is not particularly holiday-ish. There you go.
There we go.
Oh, nice.
I threw on my Skellington sweater.
It was a nightmare before Christmas sweaters?
The nightmare before Boxing Day.
There you go. Introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, everybody. It's been a while. I'm not sure who's on there yet, but hopefully we get a few people coming up here. Greg Snyder, Associate Editor, Nerd Caliber, a.k.a. Wonder Llama Photography, and on occasion, Wonder Llama Cosplay. It has been a little while. My work schedule is insane, and I've been traveling all over the Eastern Seaboard doing work stuff, but things are hopefully calming down a little bit, and I'll be back to be snarky with Rodney, my personal doppelganger.
Yeah, this is a lot more white than it is pink, I'm just saying. Or actually,
I
pretty
went
much straight up magenta, I'd say.
Yeah, it started out like a nice fuchsia, but it's already fading.
Yep. You're in magenta.
And I'm enjoying my sweet holiday llama mug.
I am enjoying my those guys.
Wild Bills.
Wild Bills, thank you.
Technically I'm off this week, so that should really be whiskey and not tea, but it's actually tea.
It really should be. But anyway, folks, since we do have a lot of things we want to talk about, let's get into the news. Stop talking about booze. Why would we ever want to stop talking about booze? I have no idea. First topic tonight among the news stuff is, if you've watched the show, you might recognize those as the Glorious Ladies of Wrestling, Glow.
Yes.
Fantastic show. Such a fantastic show that it is getting its own comic book. Not to be confused with when some of the Glow characters, I think, appeared in Marvel, back when the actual Glow wrestling show happened. Because this is the show on Netflix is actually based on an actual wrestling league that happened a couple of decades ago. But anyway, the
actual Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling.
The actual Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. Yeah, and in the show it's the Glorious, right? I think that was the difference.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. IDW, known for doing their adaptations of television and other media, is going to be the ones publishing it. They announced earlier this week, or I guess it was earlier this week, that this comic book will be coming out when? March. So if you like the show, and the show was hilarious, if they have anybody on this show who is remotely as good at writing comedy, male characters, female characters, they didn't matter. It was just really good, solid comedy. It's going to be a good comic book.
Should be interesting.
We're going to put that on your poll list, Greg?
I'll put that on the poll list. A brief, funny story, because Dragon Con is the center of the universe of these things. While I was doing my daily Nerd Caliber roaming the halls and taking photos of interesting people, did we get bounced off?
No, I just turned the bumper music on, even though I wasn't even on that screen. But anyway,
wandering the halls of Dragon Con, taking photos of people. There were actually quite a few pretty impressive, glorious Ladies of Wrestling cosplays. And there was an incredible Zoya. Took a shot, her and her friend, who I thought was a friend at the time. Flash forward to later that evening while we were getting ready to get into our evening cosplays. She walked into the room with what turned out to be her sister, good friends of the people we were rooming with, and we wound up getting drunk with them for the rest of the weekend.
Awesome. Yeah, New York Comic Con too, just fantastic. Zoya's in particular, but a whole bunch of them from the show. Really amazing cosplay.
Yep. Show some great Liberty Bells.
Oh yes, yep. So moving on, our next bit of news here is the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Now I have not seen. This isn't the news that they have a holiday special out. Another episode. That news is out there. I haven't seen the holiday special. The news is that the show has been renewed for not season 2. We announced that happened right after it debuted. Season 3 and season 4. So, Daredevil gets kicked to the curb, but, Sabrina is going to be there for 4 years. I'm not complaining, but I'm kind of complaining.
All right, I'm that weird lone holdout guy that found it meh. I wanted to like it. I tried to like it. I don't know. It wasn't quite campy enough. It took itself a little too seriously. Yep. And I got really, really, really tired of virtually every shot being, all right, photography geeks thing here for a second, of being like the tilt shift style where, the entire outline of everything is like that, sort of semi-translucent. It's usually what they do shots like that to like focus in on something important happening in the middle of the screen, or to give that kind of like I'm running through the forest on drugs effect.
So if you notice in the first,
relentlessly,
they did, but you notice in the first couple of episodes they use it whenever there's magic happening, which happens a lot, but not always. But later on, it just became sort of the default way to present the fact that they're in a weird place. And so it was always happening. It was the go-to way to shoot anything.
It messed with my whittle mind.
Yeah.
It felt like looking at 44 minutes of an Instagram feed.
And I bet that bothers you and me a lot more than it bothers a lot of other people.
'Cause we're old.
You got that, folks? We're old. Byron, hey, welcome to the chat. You need to finish season 1 of... So I assume you're talking about Sabrina, like Greg was. He did finish season 1, obviously, and was not thrilled. Anyway, moving on to our next...
You know what? My wife is homesick right now. We've got a giant bottle of NyQuil. Maybe I'll just like pound half of that and crank through the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, you won't make it, dude. It's not okay. That exciting. I have to say, there are some moments that really are, but there are some episodes where you don't need NyQuil to fall asleep. Still liked it.
I was thinking more about the like.
Oh, tripping. Yeah. Mix NyQuil with some other things and make some like straight up Slizurp.
Slizurp. There we go.
Anyway, moving on to our next bit of news. So that is an image right there of Deku from My Hero Academia as he is going to appear in the game Jump Force. And I think it's pretty legit. I like the anime look. I like the transition to CG. He is, in fact, going to be in Jump Force. When the game hits, I think on February 15th. It doesn't say for sure. Yeah, it doesn't indicate that he's going to be downloadable content. It looks like he's going to be playable when the game hits. As is Trunks from Dragon Ball, Renji from Bleach. I know some people who are very excited about that. And Boa Hancock from One Piece. If there's a reason to watch One Piece, and I don't, it would be Boa Hancock or Nami. Because they are both gorgeous, tough ladies. But Deku's the big news.
But do they wrestle?
Of wrestling. Gorgeous, tough ladies of piracy. Glop. Yeah, no, I don't think so. Emma, did anyone watch Attack on Titan Season 1? Yeah, but that's not 2018 news. Yes. Back when it actually happened. Let's get Deku back there because our next piece of news is actually also about Deku et al. and that is that My Hero Academia's Season 4 has been announced, and it will happen this October. This coming October. Obviously not this October, because that was a couple of months ago. So you only have to wait until almost an entire year, 10 months, to be able to see the next season of My Hero Academia. But good news now, you know when it's going to happen. So, all of you BNHA fans, or I guess I should, all of you fellow BNHA fans, October, I hope you can wait.
I can wait.
I'm sure you can wait. Yeah, Byron, it is an impressive roster. I think you're getting back to Jump Force. They get a lot to mine from. You think there's a lot of characters in that shonen book. I'm going to go back real quickly, and it is from the...
Ooh, uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh, Greg says.
My light just ran out of juice. I'll be right back.
Well, while Greg is looking that up, I will try to see, it's not in here, what the name of the magazine is that the shonen stuff, the shonen characters from Jump Force are coming from. Byron, you would know this. Shonen Weekly? Anyway, Byron, if you can remember, tell me what that particular magazine is. But while Greg is doing that, we'll move on to our next bit of news.
My table lamp, my LED light just ran out of juice, and I don't have a backup battery handy. So
Shonen Jump. Thank you, Byron. That makes sense. Shonen Jump. What you're seeing right there, folks, on your screen is not Shonen Jump. Although in a way it kind of, well, no, that would be a tenuous connection. That is a scene from Batman vs. Robin, a recent, couple of years ago, Warner Brothers animated Batman product. And the news is that there is a guy out on YouTube who is considering maybe suing or talking to a lawyer about the fact that this particular fight that you're looking at right here is martial arts move for move, and as it turns out, cinematographically, from a cinematography standpoint, shot for shot, what he did with a martial arts web series he still actually works on, I guess, but a version that was done back in 2012. The series is called Slug Street Scrappers, and it's a bunch of actual really good martial artists, if you go look at this thing up on YouTube, who are doing their best sort of Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter kind of real life action YouTube series. If you go look, geektyrant.com is where you can find a lot of this stuff, or you go just look up Slug Street Scrappers on YouTube, and I'm sure it will show his comparison footage between the two, and there's no question. I have. Do we have footage of the original shoot? Yeah, like I said, Byron, go to geektyrant.com or go to YouTube and search Slug Street Scrappers. And I guarantee, because this controversy is blowing up,
God.
His comparison about the plagiarizing is going to be the first thing that pops up. When I looked at it, my only possible excuse for what Warner Brothers did would be if they are both basing their moves off of some sort of pre-existing standardized kata, or whatever they call them in Taekwondo, which I can't remember, even though my son took it for years. But I don't think that's the case, because then once you can't use links in the YouTube chat, unfortunately. Sorry, Greg.
Thanks, YouTube. You suck.
Oh, no, there goes our monetization because you criticized YouTube. Darn it. But he then points out how when the camera goes from a medium-wide shot, so you see both the full figure fighting, to a close-up, is exactly the same in his video as it is in the animated show. Like, right at literally at the same point when an elbow strike is coming back towards the guy behind Batman. It's there's no question. Pumse. Thank you. Kata are called pumse in Taekwondo. So, according to Byron, thank you, Byron. I don't know. You can't copyright, martial arts moves or trademark them. You can trademark dance choreography. So he might have a case to say, the fight choreography.
Might be able to qualify it as that.
But even so, I go get a lawyer because Warner Brothers has big pockets, and they aren't going to want to fight this. Get your paycheck, dude.
Hell yeah.
Some animator, even if the animator, and he makes this point that Warner Brothers seems to farm out their fight animation to animators in Asia. So a subcontractor or a freelancer for Warner Brothers stole your moves. That's still under Warner Brothers, man. So.
Well, if he keeps this up, maybe he'll be in Fortnite soon. Hi-yo!
Speaking of people suing, you know what? Carlton made that dance. Maybe somebody did it before him.
There's a good segue into one of our next segment. Is that? Yep, that is actually our next segment. Speaking of Carlton and one of his former co-stars.
There you go. Thank you, dude.
Who's gone on to bigger and slightly
bluer
more
things,
lucrative and potentially bluer.
Bigger and bluer. No, he said very clearly he will be blue. Anyway, so what popped up there and what Greg is alluding to is the first images from the live-action Aladdin. And even though they put this image out there officially and EW ran it, they have said, and Will Smith has confirmed, he will in fact be mostly blue throughout this thing. He will appear in his own natural skin tone occasionally when he's trying to appear as a human around other humans. But he's mostly going to be blue. Apparently they've written in some scenes where the genie appears not just in front of Aladdin, but with other people around, or does things with him while has other people around who don't know about the genie. So he will have his normal skin tone occasionally, but again, what they've said is he's going to be mostly blue, which, again, I don't care. Starfire is not orange in Titans. Who cares?
True.
But the images, I think look pretty cool.
They look funky. They
Yeah.
look fairly spot on. It's actually, I mean, we've known about casting news on this for quite a long time, so it's no surprise. But it's nice to see people that look ethnically appropriate.
Yep.
They aren't a bunch of middle American white kids that got cast to be Aladdin and Jasmine.
Yep. An Egyptian and a Brit of Pakistani descent, I think. I'd have to look that up. So very cool. And apparently another person of some sort of Middle Eastern descent who is playing a completely new character that is Jasmine's best friend. So she's got a best friend.
So they've got a person playing the tiger now?
No, the tiger's still in it. But yeah, that would be... The tiger transforms, turns into Beast Boy. It's pretty cool.
Is it an Asian tiger, or do they get an American tiger?
I cannot tell you. I'm not really sure. Wouldn't an American tiger be a cougar?
No, that's a mountain lion.
Okay. Well, all right. Good point. It's a lion. Byron, it looks like a mixture of the original movie. Well, yeah, that's true. Actually, it's funny. When I went to get this image, I had to get the exact one from EW, Entertainment Weekly, because so many other images are actually of the musical, of the stage play. And the designs are so close that I went, hey, wait a minute, they're on the stage. Why would they be on a stage?
So I'm going to shift gears a tiny bit because this was the mind fuckery in my book that apparently kind of had slipped below the radar.
Mm-hmm.
Show of hands. Who knew from the outset this was a Guy Ritchie movie? No, I did not. I just learned that recently.
I think it would have been
Uh,
better if you said who didn't know, because then we could actually put up our hands. But
okay,
that's okay.
who was unaware from the outset that um, that's a really bold, if somewhat mind-bogglingly strange choice of people to make this movie. Um, his last movie was a financial disaster, and for good reason. I reviewed it for Nerd Caliber. It was, if it had been 20% more lock, stock, and two Excaliburs, it would have been okay. Uh, it was trying awfully hard to be something that it had no fucking idea what it was. Pardon my French. Um, I can't
The
imagine
movie,
that
by the way, was King Arthur: Legend of the
King
Sword.
Arthur. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I can't imagine that the Disney overlords will allow any degree of too much Guy Ritchie-ness to creep into things.
Well,
Um,
plus you can't. I mean, you've got Will Smith. I guarantee that Will Smith isn't going to Guy Ritchie dialogue up his character. He's going to. They brought him in to do the Will Smith version of Robin Williams. Fast, funny. You know, although Fast and Funny is also a Guy Ritchie trademark.
Not zany funny. Robin
True.
Williams' Genie was slapstick, goofy, zany, that type of funny. His stuff is all about Guy Ritchie stuff. For anybody that's seen Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, etc., that is all about the witty repartee, the fast back and forth of Cockney slang,
Yeah.
gangster talk, etc. And it works in that context. It's great in that context.
Yeah.
So yeah, this just gets weirder and weirder to me.
Yeah. Just a
I,
second.
I also screen.
Just
Sorry?
Byron asks, and Byron, yes, he did executive produce the new, very recent Robin Hood with Taron Edgerton. But he didn't direct it. He produced and directed King Arthur: Legend of the Sword. But it's clear that they are thematically the same thing. They are
Oh yeah.
a very anachronistic, out of time retelling of two enormously popular legends within the UK,
Yep.
and they're of an ilk. But I haven't seen Robin Hood, so I don't know how much that dialogue matches the Guy Ritchie sort of. There's a scene where.
Sorry, go ahead. I thought you were done.
There's a scene in King Arthur where Arthur is being interviewed by essentially the local chief of police, and it is straight out of a Guy Ritchie cop bad guy scene in any one of his movies. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I screened that with. I know this is about Aladdin and not about King Arthur, but I screened that with a friend of mine who writes reviews for another site. And we both just kept looking at each other like, what just happened there? What? Yeah, honestly, if it had been, it was like if you took modern day London underworld and just swapped in 8th century Londinium with some swords instead of shotguns. It's the same. It was the same thing. So yeah, very.
Just
and Robin Hood looks like it was.
It was called London by the 8th century. So.
Wasn't it still Londinium by the time that Arthur was a guy?
Yeah, but that was 5th century probably.
All right, let's not get off on another sidetrack here.
Yeah, and in fact,
let's debate the history of ancient Albion.
Yes, and we're going to move on from that. So Aladdin looks pretty cool, I gotta say, and we've said this before. Yay for their casting choices. Let's keep it up.
So here's my last thing on that. I know that Beauty and the Beast is now the yardstick we have to compare this against, because it's taking a classic Disney animation from that same era, remaking it as a live action movie with all the same songs, most of the same beats, etc. That was an extremely polarizing movie. I screened it. I thought it was pretty to look at. It had no real reason to exist. It just didn't. There wasn't. It just left me flat and disinterested and I tried to watch it on cable to see if it got better with the second viewing, and it didn't. My fear is that this is going to be much the same. And for me personally, as a fan of classic Disney from that era, Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin are probably 1A and 1B in my mind of my favorite Disney movies from that era. Um,
Yeah.
so, again, as I always say, I'll give it a chance. Maybe it'll be awesome. Maybe it'll be terrible. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. I'm fingers crossed. Just and maybe because of Guy Ritchie's involvement, I think it might be different enough to be worthwhile to stand alone as a live action. I didn't think Beauty and the Beast was, even after seeing it, needed to be made. All right, moving on to our next. We're now going into a couple of trailers that dropped last week, or this past week. And that one right there, Thor Ragnarok 2, which looks really awesome. Oh, my bad. That is, of course, Men in Black International, which is the official name for that. There we go. I have to scroll up so I can see the chats here. I was really excited about this when I first heard about it. I love the casting. I'd bring Tessa Thompson and Chris Hemsworth back together is really cool. Liam Neeson as the London head of the MIB. Yes, so much yes. And then I saw the trailer and went, wow. They dropped my level of anticipation noticeably. And I'm not really entirely sure why, other than the fact that it just looks... The trailer is just a hyperkinetic bunch of slick set pieces of people shooting stuff, for the most part, with an occasional, slower moment that sort of explains how Tessa Thompson figured the stuff out.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
In my mind, it is. One of the things about the original Men in Black franchise that makes it most interesting are the aliens.
Yep.
And other than seeing the coffee guys...
And Vincent D'Onofrio. And Vincent D'Onofrio,
Vincent D'Onofrio
as one of the aliens.
But even the later movies, 2 was 3 having what's his name from Flight of the Conchords and from Legion as the head, as the main bad guy in 3. He was fantastic, even though I can't remember his name.
Jermaine Clement? I
yes.
didn't actually see 3.
Yeah, Jermaine Clement. Yeah, Jermaine Clement's the main bad guy.
I might go see that because Jermaine Clement is amazing.
Yeah. Byron, you should go see it just for Jermaine Clement. And it does explain a really interesting thing. Actually, that's not true. For Josh Brolin doing the best Tommy Lee Jones impersonation you've ever heard in your life. It's amazing. The rest of the movie doesn't. The plot doesn't hold together that well, and so on. But it's got some really nice bits. This trailer just looked like somebody took the gunplay stuff from the first movie and went, "Hey, look, people shooting in London now instead of somewhere else."
So it struck me very much the same. It's funny, we have, for anybody that's watching that's not part of the Nerd Caliber group, we have a Facebook group where we post links and story ideas, and the comment threads, as you'd expect, are a lot of back and forth. And it was fascinating after this was brought up as a thing to talk about this week. There were a couple of people who responded, were like, "Holy hell yeah, this looks amazing." And several people who were like, chirp, nope, thank you, next. I, for better or for worse, fall into that latter category. Putting Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson together in and of itself, I'll go watch it just for that, because they were so good together in Ragnarok. It looks like they've got that same same kind of easy back and forth chemistry that really works so well in Ragnarok. So that's a plus. That's a check in the plus column. But I came away from this thinking someone clever wrote a Men in Black script writing application,
or
and you
fan
put
fiction.
in character names, setting, aliens, and then you hit enter, and then an AI went off and wrote the script and did the set design or the action design. It looks really cliched. It's playing on the nostalgia that everybody is going to go for. Um, Again, could be great, could be lousy. Guess we'll find out. It's my stock.
Now, I do have to say,
My
the
stock
one thing
take.
that surprised me and that I kind of like that, so who is it that plays the head of the New York branch when, in the trailer when Tessa Thompson figures out and walks in? It's Emma Thompson?
Oh, it's Emma Thompson.
Yeah.
Yep.
Uh, when Tessa Thompson, well, that's kind of funny, yeah, hits on her, and I had to watch it the second time to realize that what she was saying, she was hitting on her hard. As like, yes, that's please more of that. I love the idea that her character is apparently going to be a pretty aggressive, either lesbian or bisexual character, and I was like, yes, go for it.
Seeing as how they kind of squanched that in Ragnarok, there was a lot of talk behind the scenes. If you read any of the the scuttlebutt, as it were, there was her character was supposed to be basically the same
Yeah,
as what you just described.
yeah, they
Not
actually.
really specifically defined as lesbian or bisexual, just maybe pansexual.
I
Uh,
think there was one scene where that they actually did film where she either makes a comment to or comes on to a female character, and they
yeah,
cut that.
they
That
cut
didn't
that.
wind up in the final
Yeah.
episode or final show.
Wait, does all right? Here's the important question: does Disney own the MIB franchise? The assumption is yes, because there's very little they don't own these days. But because
Let's
I
find out.
think
The
that the
first trailer, first.
the Disney family morality ethos may have been behind that.
Possibly. I am looking for who's producing this. Um,
Let's see what the internet has to say.
so, well, it's written by. Oh, okay. It's written by the two guys that wrote the original Iron Man. And it's coming out June 14th this coming year. In case anybody needed to know that, I am not seeing it in this article. So yeah, I think we'll have to go
All right, I'm
to.
looking on IMDb. Columbia Pictures and Sony Pictures and Amblin Entertainment.
So that would be a
So
big no.
no. Interestingly, well, so anyway, may or may not be relevant, but I think that type of Disney family friendly, nothing that's even remotely outside of the standardized mainstream approach to people is acceptable.
Yeah.
So
Uh, that
check back in mid-June and we'll be talking about it.
Speaking of too family friendly, the next trailer that dropped that we're going to be talking about, Hellboy, the new version of Hellboy. We saw the first trailer. We get to see finally David Harbour in action. Greg was talking about how MIB trailer, the MIBI trailer, was a little divisive in the comments in our secret group. This was much more so. This was, oh man, that looks really awesome. I hate it. Burn in hell. This is awful. I mean, it was really, you were on one side or the other. There weren't a whole lot of people who went, eh.
Yep.
Um, it it definitely has some issues as far as I can see. I'm not crazy about the prosthetic makeup work. I'm more not crazy about the fact that it clearly in the trailer is affecting David Harbour's voice. It sounds like a guy talking through a mask at times, and that bothers me. But the look, the tone, the nature of the story, that doesn't bother me at all. I like it. One of the criticisms I've read about it, and this actually came from the Nerdist article that we're using as our reference piece here, is that apparently it was initially pitched as a much darker, almost sort of like a horror version of this story. And this trailer is funny. It's like lots of funny. It's original Hellboy movie funny or more. And that apparently has really ticked off a lot of people. That they're, where's our horror?
So this is, I think, more than anything I can think of, very much has to be in the wait and see what happens category. I'm scrolling down to try and find something real quick here. We spent Thanksgiving with some folks yesterday.
Or Christmas.
Oops, that was the wrong thing. What did I say?
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving? No, we didn't spend Thanksgiving yesterday. Um, No, this is not a Christmas episode of Doctor Who. Um, Sorry, I was looking for that article, but I couldn't find that offhand. Doesn't matter. With someone who is a hardcore Ron Perlman fan, Hellboy fan, Mike Mingla fan, and we got into that, and her reaction was much the same. It was like, yeah, it looks cute and funny, but it's not supposed to be that, and all the talk is about that. And they both said, now this is wild, rampant rumor. I'll be the first person to say that, but something to the effect of this was a like a an approved trailer, but there are other trailers out there that are taking other pieces from the movie. That this was like a friend of a friend saw this and told me. So again, take this with a huge grain of salt. That the Green Band trailer that hasn't been released is much more centered on what they've been talking about as far as horror goes.
Red Band trailer. Color of your sweater. This
The
is a
Red Band
green
trailer
band.
is the one that's been
Red band means the adult. Green band is the normal.
okay. Then I'm just messing up the nomenclature.
Yeah.
The approved trailer that's been released that we were looking at here versus what looks like another trailer that was cut but not approved for release as yet.
Okay.
So
and
again, wild friend of a friend of a friend sort of thing. So who the hell knows?
And we do know people that are in the industry, but we also know people who will look at a fan trailer and just go, "Oh yeah, that's the real trailer."
Yep.
So,
yep. So again, I feel like I've said this several times here. Could be good, could be lousy. Guess we'll find out. I like it so far. I'm entertained by it. It's a hell of a cast. You had me at Ian McShane. He's. I wouldn't say he can do no wrong in my book. He may be perfect for the character. It's going to be kind of hard to improve on John Hurt because he was pretty stunning.
Awesome. But
and Ian McShane is very much a chewer of scenery in a lot of ways, but he's also Ian fucking hoople-headed cocksucker McShane. You can't really go wrong.
That's no, maybe the Bureau of Paranormal Research is he's the it's their version of the Hotel Winchester. He's going to wind up getting John Wick involved at some point. Anyway, all right, so we're jumping into our retrospective of 2018. It's just about the right time here for that, and we're going to start. Our first category is movies. And the first thing, before we even get into it, although I'll bring this one up because one of my favorites was Black Panther, so I'm putting up a Black Panther image. But the big news, obviously, was the approval of the Disney-Fox merger. We finally got the actual news that, yep, the universes are colliding, the streams are crossing, Disney owns everything now, or almost everything, and everything will change, which is one of the reasons why nothing about the next phase of the Marvel Universe could be. Could be. There's your next Disney princess, MCU princess right there. So that's one of the reasons why the next phase of the MCU has just been completely silent. Or Marvel has been completely silent about the next phase of the MCU.
That will go back to our rampant conspiracy theory over the past year that could be a big part of why all of the Marvel series on Netflix have been shuttered. Maybe coincides with Disney's new pay-per-stream channel.
Right.
Who knows? They say no, but who knows?
Which, logically it shouldn't because they don't have any say in that. Netflix is the one that's actually paying Marvel to make these shows. Unless Disney comes behind the scenes and writes a really good deal.
Disney's one of the few players these days that could actually Bigfoot a company like Netflix.
Yep.
No one else. Sony can't come up and say, Netflix, give us our shit back.
Yep.
Disney can do that.
And Netflix can't say anything about it. So Black Panther. Black Panther was amazing. Black Panther was one of the best movies of the past year. It was exciting. It was well written. It was full of feels. I had a couple of little quibbles about the CGI, particularly related to the fight at the end. Um, Simply because it relied too much on CGI, given the setting that it was in. It was essentially, if you thought about it, it's two guys fighting in an entirely green area, because everything around them, including their suits, is CGI. So that bothered me just a smidge. And if that's the one thing I can take away as a problem from an entire movie, uh, well, that and why there's snow in the mountains that are upriver or downriver of where he falls off a cliff, and there are fisher people there who are part of a vegan society. But anyway, other than that, that's a minor quibble.
Don't read too much into it. Yeah,
Uh,
consider it the hit to miss ratio of Black Panther to most of the other Marvel movies that came before it. It's batting like 975 compared to a few of them. Um, yeah, agreed all around. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Probably my favorite superhero movie of the last several years, anyway. Um, the central conflict was believable and relatable. Um, Personally, I'm not, the Infinity War, not my favorite stuff because to me, this is purely opinion here. Once you get into giant supernatural ultra galactic beings who can crush half of mankind with a blink of an eye,
all
that's that's
life,
that's
half of
that's
all life
boring.
in the universe.
All life, half of the life, some of the life, whatever. That's boring to me. There's nothing. I mean, suspension of disbelief is one thing, but that's just so utterly outside of the human, ken that that's why I never liked Superman particularly much. Black Panther, the conflict was, like I said, it was totally relatable. I bet 9 out of 10 people who saw it have had a similar, well, not a super similar, but have had a family conflict like that, or have been in a fight like that with a friend who've been super jealous about prerogatives. And,
Yep.
do you find a way to fix it, or do you beat the snot out of each other?
Hopefully, that
Um,
friend is not a CIA Black Ops operative. Uh,
Preferably not.
Preferably not. Yeah, it was
Plus, you got to see Andy Serkis in camo shorts or camo pants rather, and not 400 pounds of motion capture.
and singing. What the hell was he singing when he was about to be interviewed?
God, I don't even remember. I know what you're talking about. I can't think of it. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Yeah, but anyway, Andy Serkis singing. How can you not love that? Byron Spider Verse. I did not bring up an image for because I haven't seen it, and I know you did because you reviewed it for us. And I'm 100% in agreement that it's going to be wonderful. Um, but
I think I'm going on Sunday. I haven't seen it yet either.
cool, cool. Well, so you brought up Infinity War. Let's talk about Infinity War. I have it up there as one of my favorites. Uh, and I just watched it again now that it's on Netflix. By the way, folks, I'm sure if you want to see it on Netflix, you've probably looked up this like I had to. It will not show up anywhere in your home favorites, any sort of listing, anything that they have as far as groupings. It won't show up, and you can't search for it under the word Avengers. It, for some reason, is called Infinity War, and it will not show up in the search until you type out Infinity, space, and at least the W. So, I don't know if that's
Thanks, Netflix.
yeah, I don't know if that's a goof. Or
No. Well, maybe it may be a goof because I've got that in like it came up in one of my like home feeds at some point,
it
and I
did.
put it on my watch list.
Okay, all right.
I know it's in there to be watched maybe again this weekend, but I have not like typed out the entire word as a search.
So I've
Excuse me.
sorry, Lee. My recommendeds should actually have, since I've watched every comic book movie on Netflix. My recommended should have a comic book movie in it. It didn't. It didn't. It wasn't in any of the. Anyway. Um, so if you are having trouble finding it, that's where you can find it. But so I just recently rewatched it, and yes, it does, upon rewatching, suffer from too long, from being too long. And part of that length is a completely wasted amount of time just putting in meaningless parts of Guardians of the Galaxy humor, which we don't need. I mean, I don't mind the humor, but for this story, it becomes a pace killer. Um, and part of that's my thing. I really am not happy with the way they're taking Drax's character, uh, both in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and now in Infinity War. Um, he is big dumb comic relief with no menace left whatsoever. And Drax is called the Destroyer for a reason in the comic books. So
It's just what he does to toilets after taco night.
exactly, Drax the Toilet Destroyer. But anyway, so other than that, I thought Infinity War was probably. I can't imagine anybody else handling a group of characters that needed their own screen time that well as the Russo brothers did in Infinity War. Even though some of them were split, different parts of the galaxy, uh, it was very well done, and the Wakandan fight scene was just fantastic, as complex as it was.
Can you throw up that image you had? Can you throw that back up?
Yep.
I think Robert Downey Jr.'s face says everything you need to know about this movie. with the brash new upstart Chris Pratt stealing, stepping on his line, stealing his screen time, etc.
Yep.
I mean, granted, that's Tony Stark in a nutshell, but yeah, I liked it. It was kind of overstuffed. I mean, by definition, it's overstuffed. There's no way you have that many characters and not be. But again, like I said before, Thanos just doesn't do it for me. I've always found like the Galactus, Thanos, Darkseid, characters like that are just that are to humans as humans are to a red ant. In terms of scope, power, menace, etc. They're just there's nothing to it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
your mileage may vary.
Yeah, and the problem with that is that you don't get the sense that Thanos is incredibly powerful, but he's not that powerful without the glove, without at least one or two of the Infinity Stones.
Sure.
He could go toe to toe with the Hulk, but without the stones, the Hulk would win. Um, Anyway, moving on. The next.
We could do an entire show just called Blank versus Hulk. Who wins?
Exactly, and I'm sure somebody has done that.
Yep.
Ant-Man and the Wasp, folks. Wonderful follow-up to a fun first movie. I was a big fan.
Fun being the key word there.
Absolutely, no question. It was wonderful. It kept the fun parts and the exciting parts of the first movie, and then added more depth, added character growth. I mean, Lewis's character grew, which for somebody who was just like straight up comic relief sidekick in the first movie, that was really cool. Now, Byron, you're going to get us. Thanos can't take Darkseid. Probably no. Anyway, who cares?
We'll do an entire show at some point in the doldrums of February when there's not much news. Called Blank versus Blank. Who wins?
Realistically, they're both gods in their universes, but anyway, or a Titan in Thanos' case. The additional casting, I thought Lawrence Fishburne was wonderful. I thought the villain was a little weak. They should have either made the villain more villainous or played a little bit more with the idea of the redemption arc of the fact that this was a tragic villain.
Yep. To me, what that, because Ant-Man is kind of like the kindler, gentler Marvel movie. When I screened that when it came out, I that's actually one of my more, I put that in like my top 5 just because, again, the conflict is like on a small, reasonably relatable scale. You got
Yep.
a douchebag CEO who, daddy didn't love him enough, and, daddy, as it were, and he gets peeved and he wants to steal a super suit. That's classic comic book storyline.
I guess so. I did have, I think, one other little quibble, and that is that that's kind of a waste of Walt Goggins. Um, I mean, Walt Goggins is one of the best bad guy characters
Mm,
or actors that you can ever want to cast in your movie. Um,
fair
and,
enough.
and he was basically a toy
Kind
for
of, yeah.
yeah. Um,
But the visual jokes worked. They carried over a
oh
lot of
yes,
those into Ant-Man and Wasp
and
with
expanded on them very
the
well.
tiny trucks and everything.
Yep.
It wasn't like a sequel always is. It's not quite as novel. It doesn't get you right in the goofy feels the way that it did the first time round. But
Yep.
again, it's except for the pseudo pretend science of dancing between the protons and the sub universe, etc. Um, which was a little hokey. The rest of it I thought worked really pretty well. I enjoyed the hell out of it. It was great to see Evangeline Lilly get more to do.
Yep.
She kicked literal and figurative ass. And Paul Rudd is like the last person you would ever think to put in a Marvel movie, but he works really well.
Yep.
Know, if yeah,
And just
I don't think anyone had him on their Dreamcast list at all.
and frankly, he is the best thing I think about the Avengers Endgame trailer. Now, at the end in that trailer, where he shows up as Scott Lang as Ant-Man, just like buzzing on their door on the gate. Hi, do you remember me? It's like, yes, it's so perfect. As an aside for Paul Rudd, if you've not seen Duncan Jones' follow-up to Moon, the movie Mute, Paul Rudd is in it and plays a bad guy, and he's amazing. It's like a psychotically bad guy, and he is really, really good. The rest of the movie has its ups and downs. It's worth watching, I think. But Paul Rudd is just phenomenal in that. So I'm going to move on to this was for me kind of a disappointment, and that was A Wrinkle in Time. It was is that boo for the movie or boo for me?
For the movie.
Oh, okay.
I could not watch it.
Really? Wow.
Really.
I didn't think it was that bad.
I made it through about the first third, and it was so hoary and cliched, and just, oh my god, I'd be hard pressed to tell you, to point to specific things and say what, but very disappointed because loved the book growing up, super looking forward to it. Great cast, great director. And it was just so disappointing how I think I said to my wife when she asked me what I thought about it, I said it was kind of like watching an 80s after school special.
Yes. Yes. It was kind of like watching if Oprah existed in a fantasy world and it's an entire movie about Oprah giving everybody a car.
Yeah.
It was just well, Byron, Tomb Raider was your disappointment. I haven't seen it yet, so I didn't put it up on my list, but that's too bad. I've heard other people say similar things. And also, yeah, Wrinkle in Time is a hard book to do as a movie. There's no question about that. Yeah. There are people who have a vision that could have made this. First off, you make the three ladies weirder than they were. They were oddly dressed, strange aunts. And I would rather...
Were they the Sanderson sisters?
Kind of. Except good. They were the good Sanderson sisters and space magic instead of, like, black magic. they should have been more alien. I think they should have been more odd, more weird.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I just it was a disappointment. I'm sorry about that. I would have really loved to have seen this thing take off. And then my last one in movies is going to be not just a disappointment, just sheer garbage. Um, oh, you know what? I skipped right over. Oh, so we're going to end on a high note. Cloverfield Paradox was one of the worst movies. I mean, it was just as a horror movie, it was not horrifying at all. As a science fiction movie, it was dumber than a box of rocks. It had an amazing cast and that were completely wasted. They were really excellent, mostly non-American actors. It a very wonderful, diverse international cast, and in just sheer garbage that, without question, had the Cloverfield universe stamped onto an existing movie. That's exactly what happened. There's no question that's what happened. And it made it a piece of just almost unwatchable idiocy.
That's kind of the last part you just mentioned there is basically the same thing I thought when I screened 10 Cloverfield Lane. This was a really interesting movie before Abrams got involved with it.
All right.
It was this.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I have. 10 Cloverfield,
okay.
Yeah.
Right. So it's this really funky, weird. It reminded me of what was the name of it? Christopher Reeve and Michael Caine in this late 70s.
The
Mousetrap.
Game? The Game or the Mousetrap?
Where
the Game, wasn't it?
I can't. Where they're gay, where they're lovers,
right?
And they're playwrights,
right?
And they keep fucking with each other. It whatever. Sorry, I didn't mean to
mentally. Just to be clear.
Sorry. Yes, messing with each other's heads.
Yes, Byron. Go. That is Helmut Zemo, the actor. Anyway, I can't remember his name. Yes, that's Baron Zemo.
So the whole, was there a nuclear holocaust? Is this just John Goodman being really dark and evil and Byron Fink-esque and fucking with these poor people? And then it turned, oh my God, look, giant Cloverfield monsters! Ah. So yeah. I feel like he's Bigfoot.
Yeah. Unfortunately, and there's actually a second one, and I thought I had an image for this, and I didn't find it, Greg. So I'm sorry. Isle of Dogs. Talk about Isle of Dogs.
Isle of Dogs is probably another one of those absolute love it or hate it movies. It's very, very much a Wes Anderson movie. It's very precious. It's very twee.
My favorite word to describe him. Twee.
Twee.
Yep.
It was beautifully constructed, amazingly shot. The cast is great. I mean, it's a lot of the usual cast, but it absolutely got me right in the feels. Fantastic Mr. Fox is one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years. Maybe one of my top 10, period. It had a similar vibe, obviously. It's animated. It features a lot of animals. It wasn't nearly as precious as Mr. Fox, probably because Roald Dahl didn't have any part of the input to it. But I absolutely loved it. And I'm not. I mean, I like Wes Anderson, but I'm not what I would call like a huge fan of him per se. I like some of his stuff. I don't like some of his stuff. But one of my favorite movies last year. I've seen it several times.
There we go.
So
I'll
give you one of my least favorite movies last year, and I may be going out on a limb and opening myself up for brutal feedback here, but I didn't care for Guardians 2.
So I wouldn't consider it. Well, first off, was it last year or was it 2017? Was it the end of 2017? Let me look that one up.
I feel like it was in the last year or so.
So while I'm looking this up, I don't disagree with you. I didn't like it nearly as much as the first, put it that way. And the things I didn't like about it were seriously problematic in my mind. 2017, yeah. So
okay. I felt like it's 2018, so we can skip it then.
But
We can
yeah,
rehash problematic Marvel movies in another episode.
exactly. But like I said before, it's the start of the destruction in my mind of the characterization of Drax.
Yep.
This is the one I skipped over because we actually talked about. Anyway, no reason to say why I skipped over. Deadpool 2, folks. Come on. Deadpool 2. Uh, a sequel that stood up to the original in every aspect. Um, the introduction of Cable was wonderful. The, the, the introduction and rapid removal of the X Force was even better. Um,
That was, I mean, given how much the trailers and all the lead up stuff played up Terry Crews in particular, um, you thought that they were going to play a fairly sizable role in it and not be literal cannon fodder.
and in fact, you would be wrong. That was so good. Um, I'm a little worried about how effectively the Once Upon a Deadpool has been received, because I think that this may be Disney floating a trial balloon to see whether or not they can take a franchise that was hugely successful as a hard R and turn it into a successful PG-13.
Please don't.
I
Just don't.
agree, and as a rule, Disney has in the past not messed with uh, studios that make adult R-rated films. Miramax, for example. I mean, Disney bought Miramax, and Miramax still pumped out like Quentin Tarantino movies.
Right.
Um,
But that's, I mean, that's in a completely different space than the whole MCU,
exactly.
uh, the traditional Disney and Pixar franchise stuff.
Right.
Um,
And if they
not,
bring,
not that I was going to say, sorry, my brain just went to, what if they let Pixar make a hard R movie? Wow.
it
I'm
would,
going to
I would
ponder that one.
guarantee it would wind up like the Muppet one that just came out.
Oh, yeah, I can't think of the name of it, but I know what you mean.
So that
Sorry,
should have been on this list
I'm
because
sidetracking there.
boy, that was 2018, and what a failure that was. Um, the Happy Town murders.
Yeah.
I agree. And I hate to say I agree, but I think you're right. I think that because these are connected to the MCU, if they're gonna bring Deadpool into the MCU, they're gonna bring him in as a at worst PG-13 character.
Yeah.
Um,
It'll be interesting to see if, I mean, not that he ultimately has any direct say beyond thanks I pass, but it'll be interesting to see whether Ryan Reynolds, if Disney tries to go that way, if Ryan Reynolds is along for the ride, because I'm sure everybody here has read or heard about what a relentless cheerleader he was for making Deadpool and how hard and tirelessly he fought to make it a hard R because it wouldn't have worked nearly as well. It might have made a little more money as a PG-13, but it wouldn't have been nearly just the runaway freight train of hysterically raunchy comedy that it was if he hadn't been willing to absolutely go to the mat and say, no, fuck you, I'm going to put a lot of cocksucker jokes in this movie.
yes, but he also and everybody has written about this, and he said it himself. Was a absolutely willing participant in doing the reshoots and everything for Once Upon a Deadpool. So he may realize that his gravy train is moving into the PG universe. Byron Happy Time
Hey,
Murders was trying too hard. Yeah, it tried way too hard. Um,
yep.
anyway, we are running over and we've only gone through the first of our 5 categories here, folks. So we're gonna blast through games real quickly. That's gonna be an easy one. First game, because it won almost everything at the Game Awards and is hands down been reviewed fantastically. Red Dead Redemption 2. Um, is it the right time because of Westworld? Sure. But it's also a good game. It was just done really, really well. And, you know, in comparison to something else that's going to be coming up in a little bit. So definitely Red Dead Redemption 2 is a highlight. Um, let's go to the one that won the Game of the Year in the Game Awards, God of War. The remake, not remake, renamed original God of War. Anyway, God of War, Dad of War. Also on so many top of the year lists. You know what, Byron? So we'll jump over to that. Byron says his Game of the Year is Spider-Man, and if it was on any other platform than the PS4 right now, because it's PS4 exclusive, as I recall, correct?
Yep.
Sony. See, Sony. I would have to say yes. Well, yeah, Sony movie, Sony. Yeah, it would make sense. But that's the only thing that's keeping me from saying this beats those other two hands down. But everybody I know that's played this game is just absolutely thrilled with it. Love the game, love the characterization, love the unlockable content, all the different suits. You get the Iron Spider suit. You can get the Ben Parker suit. You can get so many different things. So that was definitely up there. This was not so much up there. Fallout 76 is a masterclass in how to screw up not only a game but the release of the game. And with nods to Lewis and some other of my friends who still love playing it mainly as a really lousy sandbox in which to just get together and have a lot of fun with your friends. And in that case, it works really well. But even Lewis, who is a Fallout junkie in the absolute most accurate way you could describe that, acknowledges just how awful certain aspects of this game is, and certain aspects are, and that its release, its screw ups with its special products, with its helmet edition, and all of the things that it's done wrong since the release. It's just sad.
Yep.
So
sad. It's funny because I'm Fallout. I would say Fallout and BioShock are my two favorite games of all time. Fallout more than BioShock, but very, very replayable in a lot of ways, just given how open they are and how, a couple of decisions early on drastically changes how it works. I haven't played 76 yet, just because call me an old curmudgeon if you want, but I like an FPS RPG, call it what you want, somewhere in the middle there.
Yep.
I don't have any massive desire to go massively online multiplayer.
In an action survival game, too.
Right.
I mean, it's got RPG elements jammed onto it, so they can kind of call it an MMORPG, but it isn't.
Yep. And, like everything, your mileage may vary. I had this conversation with a friend of mine recently. Like, to me, the big handicap in Fallout 4 was I have zero interest in running around and building houses for people. None, zero, zip.
Yep.
I also got really tired of having to teleport over here, drop off some loot, teleport over there, sell some stuff, go back. It got very tiresome. But I've also talked to people like, oh, I fucking love that. That's amazing. It's so cool to be able to you build a habitat and then people come and you do all that stuff. I'm like, just play The Sims if you want to do that. That doesn't work for me. But
now I like the crafting aspect of MMOs, which that is kind of like. But I also like the action aspect of it. And if it is a first-person shooter with RPG elements, give me the first-person shooter first. That's what I want. I lean more towards BioShock of these two franchises for that reason. Byron prefers Borderlands to Fallout, he says, which is all about the shooting and the killing.
There you go. Fair enough. That would be number 3 on my list as well.
All right, so we're moving on to TV. I didn't say your name, Echo person, so stop that. First up, Titans. If you've read my review, there's a review up on Nerd Caliber for Titans. It's problematic. It's got some serious continuity issues, mostly having to do with timing, and unfortunately that's having to do with the fact that it's shot on location so much that a show that takes place over a few days to at best a couple of weeks is clearly taking place in the outside world from let's say late winter, like multiple inches of snow on the ground, to somebody gardening. Those two things can't happen in a couple of weeks in what is supposed to be northern northern Midwest, Detroit, Chicago, and so on. The image up there is actually one of the better episodes. It's when Dick Grayson as Robin runs into the actual new Robin, who's working with Batman, Jason Todd. This Connor Walters, who plays, not Connor, Curran Walters, who plays Jason Todd, is fantastic. It's gritty. It's more violent than the trailers make out. Like, way more violent than the trailers make out. It is not, however, shot entirely in that sort of blue filter, because a lot of it's shot outdoors. A lot of it's on location. And that's a good thing. And some of the night shots look like they're shot in something that approximate very good available light. Under street lights and so on, things like that. Mr. Krakowian, looks like a good show. I would recommend watching it. Don't let your kids watch it. If your kids are fans of Teen Titans Go or even the original Teen Titans, anything on Cartoon Network, there are almost Samuel L. Jackson level of MFers in here. And the violence, the gore, is just way beyond what a kid should ever watch. But once you watch it and you look at some of the issues related to the violence, the whole controversy of whether or not Starfire has a uniform or a dress, it's like, who cares? I mean, who cares anyway, but really once you watch the show, it becomes, who cares?
No, that's the single most important thing of the entire goddamn show, Rodney.
Yes! Typing my furious reply to you, Rodney, right now. So anyway, I recommend go watch.
I'm gonna throw this one in because we're both fans. I threw it on here for one of my book recommendations, one of my favorite books of the year, and it also technically falls under an interesting bit of news. So you probably don't have a picture for this, but The Expanse, season 3 was great. They suddenly got canceled by Sci-Fi due to probably spiraling costs. There was I read something about like broadcast licensing stuff. I don't care enough to dig into that to know why. But out of nowhere, Amazon came and picked it up and gave them at least one more season.
Yep.
So who knows whether they will wrap up the first 6 books worth in the 4th season. Maybe, maybe not. But Amazon's got a lot more money than Sci-Fi does, and they're really pushing hard to get eyeballs on their Prime Video. And B, it's not basic cable, so there's a lot more adult situations and language that they can start doing that are, so I've read all the books or listened to all the audiobooks. There's not a tremendous amount of sex per se, but there's a lot of language. There's a lot of the language that you would expect from, hard-living asteroid miners living way out on the, right on the hairy edge of getting themselves dead. So I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully Amazon will basically let the same production company do their thing and just give them more money to do it better.
I agree. I would love to see that. It was a fantastic show, and I'm so glad it's picked up. I hope it comes out in 2019. I don't think so. It's probably going to be 2020 before we see the next season. Yeah, so moving on to the next show that I was really impressed with, Lost in Space. I liked it a lot. Like all shows, it had some issues. It had some pacing issues more than anything else. But the take that they put on this show was a wonderfully more modern retelling. It made the robot so much more interesting a character. Parker Posey as Dr. Smith is so much more disturbing than the original. Like, more disturbing than Gary Oldman in the movie. Parker Posey is like really out there, and it's really good.
Good to know.
Oh yeah, I
Check
would
that
if
out.
you haven't seen it, I would recommend
I
it.
haven't.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. And it's been picked up. There will be a second season, and so we're very much looking forward to that.
Sweet.
Byron, I should watch this too. Yeah, you should, Byron. It's really good. You would like it a lot, I think. Um, this I can't recommend enough, folks. It's on Freeform, Cloak and Dagger, Marvel's Cloak and Dagger, but it was shown on Hulu the very next day. So whatever that deal was a fantastic deal. Actually, it was probably from Disney's half of Hulu. Now that they bought the other half. Um, it's a wonderful version of the story. There are times when it's slow, and you don't worry about that. The characterizations are so good. The dialogue is so good. Um, it goes up and down from episode to episode. I mean, there are some characters that they introduce that are a little more facile than actually what these two young people put across. They seem real, and some of the surrounding characters occasionally seem like they're in a superhero show. Which is kind of that's the only thing that sort of pulls you out of how realistically these two young people portray young people stuck in the situation that they're in, and it is fantastic. Go watch it. It flips the narrative a little bit. She is from a broken home living on the street. He is from a super respectable, straight up upper middle class family. They're both in New Orleans. Even so, they directly address the issues that people of color are facing in this country right now. The fact that his family is well-to-do, reasonably well-to-do, makes no difference whatsoever to the way he might get treated. It's really good. Watch it. Can't recommend it enough. And can't wait for the next season. Wrapping this up. Well, actually, Greg, you didn't put in your list any recommendations for TV, and I don't probably then have any images.
Yeah, probably not. So I was just thinking through that again. And don't need to go into detail. Love Stranger Things season 2.
Yes.
Had some problems like everything else, but overall it was rock solid and entertaining as hell.
Should have put that in there. You're right.
Didn't think about that. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. I mean, we did a whole thing on Luke Cage season 2, so we don't need to go down that rabbit hole again. But it was good.
So we are going to talk again just a little bit about the news that you mentioned before. That's all Netflix Marvel. Iron Fist season 2 was way better than season 1. Still the low man on the totem pole. Daredevil season 3 was outstanding. Maybe better than season 1. Certainly way better than season 2. Way better than the Defenders. It was wonderful, and then of course it was canceled like right after the season premiered. And as we said, or as you said earlier, there's no official word that Disney had any pull or any say on this. But in an interview last week, a Disney official said that it is possible that these shows, these characters, could wind up on the Disney streaming service Disney Plus.
Like I said, it's rampant speculation, and it's borderline tinfoil hat conspiracy theory stuff, because it makes too much sense.
Yep.
But there's nothing beyond speculation behind that.
Yep.
All right, so wrapping up TV shows, 2019. What are you looking forward to?
We're going to do a 2019 show at the beginning of the year, so let's not do that right now. But keep the thought in mind, because we've got anime and then books, and we've only got 10 minutes. I want to wrap this up in 90 minutes. And animated can be pretty fast because you don't watch anime, right?
I don't watch a ton of anime. I will say that even though it's probably not technically a 2018 show, Agretsuko is probably my favorite anime thing that I've seen in a long time.
Agretsuko is in fact a 2018, and I probably should have put that up here.
Yep. It speaks to my black little cubicle farm working office drone. Also has played in metal bands. Soul.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, she's a red panda. Who doesn't love a red panda?
And you know what? I also don't have the other Netflix 2018 Castlevania.
Forgot all about that. Excellent show.
Me personally, I have not finished season 2 yet because I'm having a very hard time getting through it. And I talked to my son earlier today, and we talked about Fallout because he just started playing New Vegas. And was playing actually when I called him.
You won't be seeing him for a while.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no. Well, yeah, I won't be seeing him for a while. Anyway, he's in Poland, but still.
Shouldn't he be playing The Witcher?
He probably has. Anyway, my recommendations, and this is all out of this current season. I cannot recommend that right there. The anime with the worst possible title. Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai. And it's really awful because it's actually kind of accurate to one aspect of the story. Main character is a high school, second year in high school, who has a reputation of being what they call a rascal. He's known for possibly having caused injury to some other kids at some point in like his first year, and so therefore people are kind of afraid of him and nobody talks to him, and he's fine with it, to the extent that he actually sort of uses it as a shield to allow himself to be off color and say whatever he wants. He encounters this girl in a bunny suit this is the very first scene in the show, so I'm not giving anything away, in a library where she's trying to see whether or not somebody can actually notice her, and nobody does except him. And that sets off the general sort of fantasy magical aspect of this incredibly realistic slice of life rom-com, in which high school students are subjected to something called adolescent syndrome or puberty syndrome, where real physical manifestations of the kind of things adolescents worry about, like being seen by people or not being seen by people or bullying or all sorts of things, actually happen to them physically in the real world. And it's the best character writing possibly in any entertainment form I've seen in years. The interaction between Sakata, the main boy, and his senpai Mai, his upperclassman, the one in the bunny suit. She's in the bunny suit a couple of times in the entire show. That's not. That just happens to be when he first sees her. Is wonderful. It is Dave and Maddie from Moonlighting. It is the characters whose names I forget from Mad About You. It is just the best budding romance interaction I've read or seen presented in years. It's wonderful. And all of his interactions with the various characters are like that. The dialogue is just perfect. And the acting, the voice acting, is fantastic. This is sub. I don't know if it has dubs out yet. I don't watch dubs. I don't know whether or not the English voice acting comes anywhere close to capturing that wonderful chemistry between these two. So if you're a dub watcher, I have no recommendation on that part of it. But watch this show, folks. It's wonderful. The next one, another light novel adaptation with a horrible name. That time I got reincarnated as a slime. It's an isekai, which is Byron knows what that means. Byron says it is not dubbed yet. Good. From my standpoint, like I said, I don't like dubbed. Slime is an isekai, another world story. Somebody dies or something happens and they wake up in another fantasy world, a fantasy world. Very common trope in Japanese anime. In this case, however, the guy wakes up not as a human, but as that blue blob right in the middle there, a slime. Yes, Byron, a rabbit. Yeah, Bunny Girl Senpai is not dubbed. Thank you. And he spends the first couple of episodes trying to figure out what he is, and he's in a cave, and why he's in this cave, and what's going on. And the show is about him encountering this world, learning from it, and in every instance trying to help out whoever he runs across and make the world better. There's no darkness to this, although there are some really heart-wrenching moments when bad things do happen to people. It has one of the best depictions of an authority figure dealing with the effects of of an underling not adhering to the authority figure's wishes that I've ever seen. It makes you understand why somebody would make a decision like this, feel badly for the horrible person who was not obeying the orders. It's just really amazing writing, and you should watch it. Not just for the fact that the slime is insanely overpowered and basically is god tier, which all of these isekai shows are, or the fact that there's gorgeous elf girls and there's a lot of bouncing boobs and ecchi and so on in here, as all of these isekai do. It's the writing, folks. It's the writing and the characterizations. And yeah, so it's not the boobs, it's the writing. It's like Playboy. I read it for the story. Goblin Slayer. Goblin Slayer is a faithful adaptation of an incredibly bloody fantasy manga that strips the story down to the same sort of level that the very early Dark Tower stories from Stephen King were. Like in the first few stories of the Dark Tower, the gunslinger never had a name. It was gunslinger, it was Man in Black, it was Jungian archetype fantasy adventure. Goblin Slayer is like that. Nobody in the show has a name. I mean, Goblin Slayer is called Goblin Slayer because that's all he does. He kills what everybody else views as low-level goblins and are not worth bothering with. Except he realizes, as very few other people do, that low-level goblins breed like rabbits, and vast numbers of them are horrifying. The first 10 minutes of the show starts out like a fantasy guy's going on an adventure quest and turns into, I don't know, Tarantino. And stays Tarantino. It's brutal, like really brutal. Characters, there is some character growth and development. Goblin Slayer does change a little bit. The priestess, who is the one in the priestess-looking outfit, changes a little bit, but only very little. She is, at one point, many episodes in, she basically reverts to the same incredibly frightened, brand new adventurer that she was when we first see her in the first episode. It's really good. Again, because of the writing, how, in this case, not necessarily the dialogue or the interaction among the characters, although that's fun. It's how it takes the fantasy standards and strips them down to almost bare bones, and then juggles them a little bit to come up with something new, and does it in a very sort of violent and brutal way. So, those are my recommendations. Go watch those. And Agaretsuko. Go watch Agaretsuko. You know what? Actually, we did have two. Okay. Real quickly, the only comic book I want to put up here as a recommendation, that something, or as something to note, Oblivion Song. So Robert Kirkman's hugely touted new opus work Robert Kirkman, Walking Dead. I read the first couple issues and wasn't a fan. I think he missed way hard with this one. Um, the characters don't do anything for me. Um, so the world building is interesting, and it's a really interesting world building concept. That's not enough, as much of a world building whore as I am, to. I haven't read any of the Spider-Geddon stuff, Byron. I agree. From what I've heard, it's fantastic. Um, but of course, the big comic book news is Stan Lee. The passing of Stan Lee. It was of an age. It had to happen. It's 92, but still, it was brutal. It was a tough day when we lost Stan.
Absolutely.
All right, Greg. Now we're moving into your space, because I haven't read any of these, which is kind of too bad. I really should.
Okay.
But let's start off with, since I've already used this image before, the latest book in the Expanse series.
Okay. So this was, oh gosh, what is this officially now? Book either 7 or 8, I don't remember which. It came out the last week of December, but I didn't pick it up until January, so I'm going to call it 2018.
All right.
For anybody that's read the series, listened to the series, or less so if you've watched it, because while it's a great adaptation on TV, it's got I don't want to say suffers from it. It has the same kind of thing that Game of Thrones does. Plots diverge.
Right.
Certain things from other books get compressed. Some things get left out. But it jumps a little ways into the future in a way that actually works remarkably well. A lot of times things like that don't really work very well. It brings back some, one of the driving kind of framing devices from the earlier books, and actually puts a face to it and adds a terrifying new kind of Nazi Germany rolling over Eastern Europe, World War II sort of layer to things that none of the earlier ones did. It's very effective. It's also interesting because several of the characters are now, because it is, when I say in the future, I'm not talking like 200 years. It's like, I want to say like 20 years after the wrap up of the previous books. These folks are starting to get a little old. Stuff that, jumping in and out of spaceships in 0G with, basically mining suits on is not as easy as it was.
You're saying that Bobby doesn't fit into her armor anymore?
Something like that. So fascinating read. Again, I should say in fairness, I've only actually read with my eyeballs one of the books. The rest of them I've listened to the audiobooks repeatedly. The guy who's the narrator, whose name escapes me, but I can look it up. Fantastic. He's one of those narrators that after hearing a couple of the Expanse books, I liked him so much, I've sought out other things that he's narrated that I knew nothing about the book or the author, and bought things because I love his narration.
Cool.
So 2 thumbs up on that. It's a great, the whole audiobook series is great. I know you and I have talked about this a lot, but really it's one of the most, I don't want to call it hard sci-fi in the same range as, like, I was about to say David Niven.
Larry Niven.
Larry Niven.
Well, you got to remember,
David Niven was an amazing sci-fi.
He was. Pink Panther was a sci-fi movie. Larry Niven also wrote the Known Space series, which is as wildly speculative.
Yep.
Oh.
It's hard sci-fi in the sense that the day-to-day mundane realities of what it would be like in a not Star Trek universe where you've got FTL of sorts, where you've got phasers, etc.
Or you have gravity.
You have gravity. It gets into it, and it makes a point of it without beating it to death and making it the central focus of things, which a lot of hard sci-fi is very impressed with its description of FTL engines and how how tachyon emissions work and how your kyber crystals power your lightsabers, etc.
Don't use hard sci-fi and Star Wars anywhere near each other.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Or Star Trek for that matter, either.
That's true.
But yeah, and the politics of it is, the Game of Thrones has kind of become the new Machiavellian yardstick for groups of people with vastly different goals, desires, willingness to beat the shit out of and kill other people, how they go about achieving those goals, which is basically what politics amounts to. So, brilliant series, loved it.
Cool. Before we move on to the next book, I want to, and this is me just indulging myself, because I forgot to put this in my review of Titans, and I didn't remember this phrase or this description until I was talking to my son Patrick earlier today about Titans. Because of the violence, Titans is kind of like Deadpool or Deadpool 2 with, I was going to say less humor, but like almost no humor. Or like The Watchmen with no politics. As opposed to any other superhero sort of element that you could think of. That's a better way to describe the feel of Titans.
If you take the politics out of Watchmen, don't you just have an enormous blue penis?
We concentrate on different things, I guess. Okay, moving on to your next book. I love the title of this. Tell me about this book and its series.
I'm waiting for this one to come up.
That's Monster Baru Cormorant.
Yep. Okay. This, I have literally just started the second book. This is the second book in a series. The first book came out, I want to say 2013. It was on a lot of people's must-read, bestseller, best of lists. And for some reason, I only just started reading it this year. Wow. Just hands down one of the best books I've read in the last 10 years.
So sci-fi, fantasy, something in between? What?
It's, I guess you'd kind of call it fantasy. It's not a swords and sandals kind of thing for the most part. It is, but it's almost secondary. It's Machiavellian in a way that even Game of Thrones doesn't get to.
Ooh.
It's really hard to encapsulate, especially without doing anything remotely like spoilers, because if you spoiled the book, if you got a spoiler, it would absolutely ruin the guttural gut punch impact of things.
Yeah, let's not do that then. Let's not do that.
So, in a nutshell, it's kind of about a Roman Empire-esque imperial expansion that rolls over all of these small, island nations and mountain nations, etc., and imposes their strict moral guidelines, and they actually refer to it as ethical hygiene. So the main character grows up on a kind of Polynesian-esque island, and she has a mother and two fathers, and the fathers are gay, and it treats it just as a simple fact. It doesn't highlight it in any way. It doesn't sort of make it prurient at all. It just is. And lots of people have heterosexual desires. Lots of people have homosexual desires. The Empire crushes that to the point where even being caught thinking about having a same-sex intimate encounter will get you horribly executed. So an awful lot of that is about the underlying politics of it.
So it's a Mike Pence fantasy. Sorry.
No, this is a Mike Pence. Well, he would see he would see this empire as the good guys.
Yeah, that's
as the people that are doing the right thing. So the first book was it's brilliant. All of the one thing that I would sort of say it's brilliant, but it also kind of draws things down a little bit. He gets into an awful lot of how, if you wanted to start a rebellion, how you would use money to do it, and like economic policy of a nation level money.
Yeah.
And a couple of times I found myself thinking about, taxation routes and imperial, whether especially with Coruscant and Cormorant kind of reminiscent of each other. Anyway, I don't want to get bogged down in that.
Yeah,
It's
that always. It's funny thing is that doesn't work at all in episode one.
Yep.
It actually kind of works in the anime Spice and Wolf, which is this really interesting fantasy story that is also a surprisingly interesting treatise on early medieval economic trade policies.
Yep.
All right.
So similar sort of thing. I can't really talk anymore about what goes on without risking spoiling it for anybody who might take it up.
Yeah, so
I
let's
will
not.
just say, if you like Game of Thrones, if you find the sort of the Machiavellian machinations in Game of Thrones fascinating, more so than the brother sister sex stuff and the beheadings and the horrible everybody murdering everybody part. This is very much in that same sort of vein with a lot of understated sexual politics sitting behind it. So I can't really talk about book two because that would also be spoilery for book one. So
Yeah.
suffice to say, one of my top 10 books in the last many years. Book two is shaping up to be very much the same. If you haven't read it, the first book is called The Traitor Baru Cormorant. I'll put that in the
Traitor as
comments in a
in
second.
Donald Trump, not trader as in Trader Joe's.
Correct. Correct.
All right, so moving on to your last book here, and what will be the last topic because 10 o'clock will be way too late, is The Girl in the Tower, which,
Sufficiently generic title.
yeah.
Doesn't really convey a hell of a lot. So surprisingly enough, this is also book two in a series. The first book was called The Girl and the Nightingale, which some people may have read. It was another, I think it came out either last year. I can't remember whether it was 2018. I want to say 2017. But I read it in 2018. Brilliant retelling of traditional Russian folklore.
Oh, cool.
An area that I personally like. I back in the days, like when I was a teenager and I was reading Grimm's fairy tales and Hans Christian Andersen, I read this giant compendium of Russian folk stories about Baba Yaga, and a lot of them fall into the traditional, folklore. Evil stepmother does bad things to the good child who triumphs in the end, sort of thing.
Yeah.
This weaves together a lot of disparate Russian folklore, frost demons, evil stepmothers, the Grand Prince of Moscow. It's fairly stunning, and it's done in a you could almost call it young adult because the heroine is a young girl. It's readable on that level, but it's also sophisticated enough that it way outstrips what you would think of as a typical kind of young adult type book. So The Girl in the Tower is the continuation of that, and I'm about halfway through that one as well. Slightly different focus, a little bit less on the pure folklore aspect of it, and more on the Russian Muscovite princes fighting the remnants of the Golden Horde, the once huge Mongol empire that basically took over all of the steppes of Eurasia. Another fantastic series. There's a third book that I think just came out that I'm sure I'm going to be chugging straight into as soon as I finish book number two. So those are three of my top book recommendations for the year. I would say of all of them, if you're looking for a compelling, gut-wrenching read, The Trade of Barrow Cormorant would be, I'll give it, if I had an extra thumb, I'd give it one more thumb.
Well,
there it is.
additional
3 thumbs
thumbs. Jumping back, I missed this, Byron. And you're right. I should have put this in my anime. A Place Further Than the Universe, because that was a 2018 anime. It was back at the beginning of the year. Watch that one as well, folks. Again, fantastic character writing. You could absolutely believe that the four girls in this thing are four ultimately best friends thrown together by circumstance, and how they grow to become friends is just wonderful. But thank you, Byron. That was a good recommendation. All right, folks. An hour and 45 minutes is way too long.
Cruised.
Thank you for hanging in there, for those of you who did. And we will see you next year, as we use that old joke. And back on Tuesday, I believe. Well, no, because again, it would be
Tuesday's
Wednesday,
New Year's
because
Eve.
Tuesday is New Year's Eve. Which means Wednesday will be New Year's Day, right? No, Tuesday is New Year's Day.
No, sorry, Tuesday is New Year's Day.
Yeah. So Wednesday the 2nd will be our show next week.
Yep.
And we will see you then. Where we will be talking about things that we are looking forward to in 2019, as well as a few of whatever news things pop this week. So, thank you and good night.